Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for watching. Here on my channel, beauty is for everyone. I'm hoping this will go up in June, so happy Pride Month. I figure what better time than right now to really just drive that point home. So this video was actually a request from somebody who wants to know like which eyeshadow palette they should buy. So eyeshadow can be very personal, but I think I came up with enough categories that will represent like a variety of people and what you're looking for in an eyeshadow palette. So this video is going to answer the question, which eyeshadow palette is right for you? Which is the best eyeshadow palette from each of these categories that I'm going to be going over? For every eyeshadow palette that I mention, I will have a picture on the screen and I'll let you know the price. I should also mention that for each category, I'm going to have a budget-friendly option and a more luxury or high-end option. So the first category is all matte palettes. So this is for somebody who doesn't like shimmer. I mean, maybe you have mature skin and you feel like you don't like the look of shimmer on your eyelids. That's fine. You can get an all matte palette. If you're a working makeup artist, it's great to have an all matte palette that it's separate from the shimmers. And if you're working on sets and stuff, you know, you could have like a piece of glitter that was contaminating your matte shadows because you have them in the same palette as your shimmer shadows, and that could catch the light on camera, so you definitely want your mattes separate. Or if you work a very buttoned up job and it wouldn't really be appropriate to wear like shimmers and metallics on your face anyway, then you might want to go with an all matte palette. So for high end, I have a couple of options for this one. The first one is the Kat Von D Shade and Light Eye Contour Palette. This one is great because you have little quadrants of neutral neutrals, warm neutrals, and cool neutrals. And you can kind of mix and match depending on whatever look you're going for. Especially if you're a makeup artist, it has a really great range. But even if you're an average consumer, this palette groups the shades together, so it's really easy to know how to use them. So I really like that one. And that one is $48. Then slightly higher end, we have the Viseart Matte Neutrals palette. These palettes are all $80, all the Viseart palettes. This one is great if you know that you have some sensitivities to certain eyeshadow formulas, because the owner of Viseart has super sensitive skin, so she tends to formulate everything with that in mind. And then also the integrity of Viseart shadows is great, so if you're somebody who needs really long lasting power, then I definitely recommend Viseart. Also, if you're working on film sets and stuff like that and you need to create the same look every single time, Viseart's really good for that because the shadows are just really consistent. You know what you're gonna get. The pigmentation with them is always even, so you can produce the same look multiple times using those shadows. It's just very trustworthy. Then for high-end all matte, I have to give an honorable mention to theBalm's Meet Matte palettes. So I use the Meet Matrimony palette, but I do like the colors in the Meet Matte Nude palette as well. I would just go with whichever one has colors that speak to you more. Now these shadows are super pigmented, but they don't blend quite as well as the Viseart shadows. There's something about the Balm shadows, like they're so pigmented, and I love the colors that are available in those palettes. And if you like fun packaging, like if packaging is something that gets you excited to use the makeup, theBalm, you know, is a brand that does packaging and quality really well. So for affordable or drugstore all matte palettes, I recommend the e.l.f. Mad for Matte palette. If you need something for work and you're on a budget, or like just spending lots of money on eyeshadow is not a priority for you, I would definitely go with this one. And the e.l.f. Mad for Matte palette is $10. So those were all matte palettes, and all of those palettes that I mentioned were neutral palettes for the most part. And the next category I'm gonna call effortless/goof-proof palettes. These are still gonna be neutral palettes, but they might have a couple of shimmers in them, and they might not be quite as pigmented as the previous set of palettes that I mentioned. So they're gonna be a little bit easier to work with. So this is for more of a beginner or somebody who's just like not super interested in eyeshadow, but they just want something to chuck on for work. Kind of similar to the last category, but more like for everyday wear and for somebody who doesn't want to get like too intricate with their eyeshadow, somebody who just wants something easy. The first one is the Too Faced Natural Matte palette, or the Too Faced Natural Eyes palette. The Natural Matte palette is all mattes, and the Natural Eyes palette is the same color palette, but they have some shimmers in there. I didn't include the Too Faced Natural Matte palette in the first category because I do believe that the Too Faced Natural Matte palette only works for light to medium skin tones. So, you know, it's really goof proof for somebody with my skin tone all the way down to a medium skin tone. Somebody with a darker skin tone, it's not going to show up so much. So if you want more of a range of shadow colors, the Too Faced chocolate bar palettes are amazing. And I'm talking about the original 2 chocolate bar palettes, like the chocolate bar and the Semisweet chocolate bar. So I know I've kind of like made fun of Too Faced on my channel in the past because like it's so much packaging and marketing and all these things, and like the quality of their shadows isn't like what I would want it to be. But that being said, in the past, I loved using my Too Faced Natural Matte palette because like when you're in a rush and you have my skin tone, it's like so easy to use. And sometimes ease of use comes from like there being less pigment in the shadows. But generally Too Faced shadows are like a little bit more user-friendly than like a Kat Von D shadow or a NARS eyeshadow, for example. So I would throw most of their earlier palettes into the goof proof category. The Too Faced Natural Matte palette and Natural Eyes palette are $38 each, and then the chocolate bars are $49. For the budget-friendly option, I am recommending the Wet n Wild Comfort Zone palette. This palette is $4.99. Some drugstore prices can vary depending on where you're shopping, but it's about $5. Just incredible quality and color range for the price, and I do find it really easy to use. I would recommend it for any beginner, especially because of the price point. Now the next category is trendy and warm eyeshadow palettes. So a warm color is a color with an orange undertone, whereas cool colors are more like your blues, grays, blue purples. For example, my hair is cool and my lip is warm. So warm eyeshadows are very trendy right now. They have been for like the past few years. And these palettes are going to have your bronzes, your rust colors, purples and oranges, golds, those kinds of colors, like I said, burgundies. So for high end, the first one is the Colored Raine Queen of Hearts palette. And I'm actually really happy to be able to recommend Colored Raine because they are an indie and black owned brand. So I would say like if you want to try something that's gonna like blow your socks off, I would just splurge and get the Queen of Hearts palette. That one is $50. The next one for high end will come as no surprise to anybody who's watched any YouTube before, and that is the Anastasia Modern Renaissance palette. This one has a lot more of your like rosy and burgundy shades, but you still get like a lot of your warmer, like more neutral shades, like the more caramelly shades that are going to be like a little bit more wearable. But if you want something like super on trend for what I would consider year round actually as well, the Anastasia Modern Renaissance is a great option, and that one is $42. And then my budget friendly option for this category is actually somewhat of a dupe, actually a really good dupe for the Anastasia Modern Renaissance palette, and that is the Wet n Wild Rose All Day palette. So this one is the same exact format as the Comfort Zone palette. It's super compact, it's super affordable, it's $5. If you want to try Modern Renaissance but you don't want to spend the $42, I would just go for the Wet n Wild one to see if you like the colors. I have seen comparison videos, and I mean the Modern Renaissance palette, the shimmers are more impactful, the mattes are going to be like a little bit more pigmented, and that's reflected in the price. But the Wet n Wild one will definitely do the job. You're definitely going to get that super trendy, warm, rosy, on-trend look with the Rose All Day palette from Wet n Wild. And for $5, you can't go wrong. And if you know me, you know that the rainbow palettes is one of my favorite categories. So this category is for a lover of color, somebody who wants to create editorial looks, makeup artists, or just somebody who wants to try something fun. So the first one is by Viseart. It's the Editorial Brights. This one is also $80, and you're gonna get this one if you're serious about makeup. Like if you're a makeup artist and you do a bunch of editorial looks, this one is really good to have in your kit. The next one is the Sephora Pro Editorial, and this one is $68, and it's super fun. Like I have that palette and it's super fun to play with, but not all of the shades are a hit. Some of the shades like are a little bit lacking in pigment, and while I appreciate that they have a couple of neutrals thrown in there, I don't get why like all the mattes are brights and all the metallics are neutrals. Like it doesn't make perfect sense to me, TBH, because to me, like I want the bright color on the eyelid and I want that color to be a metallic. So I think if they had some metallic brights in there, it would have like rounded out the palette a little bit better. But anyway, I do still really like the palette and I do recommend it. So for the budget friendly option, I have the NYX what is it called? NYX Bright's Ultimate Shadow Palette, and that one is $18. So if you want a rainbow palette because you just want to like have fun with something, and eyeshadow isn't like a huge priority in your budget, then again, I would go with the NYX option. $18 is a good price for the quality of that palette and the number of shades that you get. The next category is travel and on-the-go palettes. So for this category, I chose palettes that are small and have good range. For the high-end option, I chose the Urban Decay Naked Basics palettes. Now, if you're like somebody who's obsessed with makeup, you're not gonna travel with just the Urban Decay Naked Basics palette. You're gonna want something else. If you just want something basic, then the Urban Decay Naked Basics are great little travel palettes. The original Naked Basics is a little more warm, and the Naked Basics 2 is a little more cool, and then the Naked Petite Heat is very warm and fiery. So if you like those more trendy shades, or if you have a deeper skin tone, I would go with the Petite Heat. So then for the budget-friendly option, the Wet n Wild palettes win again. So if you want something that's like more neutral and a little more versatile, I guess, I would say the Comfort Zone palette. And if you want that super trendy look, then I would go with the Rosé All Day palette. They're both neutral. I would say it just comes down to preference. For me, I would go with the Comfort Zone because I like more of the neutral neutrals rather than just the warm neutrals and the rosy neutrals. So that's what I would go with. Oh, and I think I forgot to mention the Urban Decay Naked Basics palettes are $29. And again, the Wet n Wild, Rosé All Day, and Comfort Zone palettes are $5. Splurge palettes. Which palettes do I recommend splurging on? So in general, you know, like I don't necessarily encourage splurging on makeup. I think you should buy what you need. I only recommend splurging on makeup if, you know, you feel like you're gonna get really good use out of it and it's gonna bring you joy. That's, you know, what I recommend. Now, when I say splurge for high end, I don't even mean like the colored Raine palettes. Like this was $50, which I would consider a splurge item for me. But you know, this was $50, and I think that's a really good value for this. I wouldn't call this a splurge palette compared to something like the Pat McGrath palette. This is $125, and the packaging is so luxe, and these palettes would actually be my pick for the splurge palette over the Natasha Denona palettes, because I feel like when you think of super ridiculously expensive eyeshadow, I would say it's between Pat McGrath and Natasha Denona for those like super splurgy items. I've worked with both, and I gotta say that I prefer the Pat McGrath formula. The only thing is, and I've mentioned this in past videos, or maybe just one video, but anyway, the shimmers. So like these three shades right here, this palette happens to be the Subliminal palette. The shimmers, I just don't like. I just don't like the shimmers. I think they're like kind of useless unless you use them as bases for the more sparkly metallic shadows, because these are absolutely gorgeous. And when you layer them on top of like another shadow, like either, you know, a creamy base or another powder shadow, that will kind of like transform the metallic shadow, because they usually have like a duochrome to them. I have a couple of tutorials using this palette. I'll have them up here somewhere, and I'll link them down below as well. But anyway, this would be my pick for a high-end splurge palette, to be honest, even though I don't like the shimmers. Because the mattes and the sparkly shadows in here are to die for. They're just amazing. And then I actually have a splurge item for the drugstore as well, so like a budget-friendly splurge item. And that is the newer Milani palettes. There are two. One is called the Most Loved Mattes, and the other one is called Bold Obsessions. And these are $20. $20 is a lot of money for a drugstore brand, for, you know, for items that classically are like $10 and under. $20 is a lot of money. So, you know, if you are a drugstore makeup shopper, I would consider that a splurge item for the budget-friendly category. My last category is eyeshadows you should try for deeper skin. Hello, this is Editing Sophie. I just wanted to clarify because I realized that it kind of seems like by creating a separate category, I am implying that the rest of the palettes are standard, aka standard for people with light skin. That's not what I mean. I think I did a decent job of clarifying throughout the rest of the video which palettes have a deep skin option versus palettes that are more universal. However, I wanted to include this category so people would know which brands to look towards for eyeshadows that are just more pigmented and designed with people of color in mind. Thank you. All right, back to the video. For the high-end option, I recommend anything by Colored Raine. I mean, Colored Raine is a Black-owned brand, so I would only assume that, you know, those eyeshadows are designed with people of color in mind. Shadows on dark and deep skin tones need to be pigmented enough to show up. Even if it's a dark color, if it's not pumped with enough pigment, it'll appear ashy on darker skin. So definitely go for Colored Raine. If you're in the mood to splurge, Pat McGrath, definitely pigmented enough. But a Colored Raine palette, their smaller palettes will run you like about 30 bucks, and then their larger palettes will run you about $50. For the budget-friendly option, I went with Juvia's Place. I mean, oh my god, Juvia's Place shadows are so beautiful, and for the price, you know, everybody who loves color should try them. I didn't include it in the rainbow palettes because I wouldn't say they have any rainbow palettes, but they do have like a lot of nice colorful and neutral shadows. So I definitely recommend Juvia's Place for everybody, but particularly for people who need more pigment in their shadows. So it's not the most budget friendly, but for what you're getting, it's really good. So their palettes are anywhere from like $17 to $25. And that concludes my which palette should you get video. Which palettes satisfied these categories for you if it's something that I didn't mention? Let me know. I'd love to know. Otherwise, I will have everything I mentioned listed in the description below. If I have any tutorials using these palettes, I will link them down below as well so you can see them in action. And otherwise, that's pretty much it. Please, I would love it if you could give this video a thumbs up and subscribe before you go. That would be awesome. And otherwise, thank you so much. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.